Hi everyone, I'm back with the latest 1906 diary entry. So if you watched the 1921 diary entry yesterday, I went on a bit of a rant, but now we're back from the more complex Dmitri of 1921 to our little devil of 1906, who is also sometimes quite a sweet boy, as we'll have a chance to see in this diary entry, which is the 26th of April, a Wednesday, and in Peterhof. And he's going to stop writing when he's in Peterhof, I'm sorry to say. He's going to skip just about a month. So I believe this is actually our last diary entry of April, and we will resume on, I think, the 25th of May. But for the moment, I'm going to do this long diary entry of the 26th in two parts, because Dmitri makes good on his promise to tell us more about the 17th, his moment of triumph, and particularly about the supper that Uncle Nicky took him to the mess of the 2nd Guards Rifle Battalion, his own battalion. All right, so let's dive in. We just arrived here. Counter to my expectations, my rooms are very nice. It's Maria who's unhappy. She only has 2 rooms, and the second one is a bathroom. We came here on the Tsar's train with all the children. Incidentally, what a wonderful train the Sovereign has, and very cozily arranged. No wonder Aunt Alex said that she lived on that train when the Sovereign was on maneuvers. I was so sad about leaving Tsarskaya. Sad to leave the private garden, the boat, the train I was fixing but had to leave unfinished, and other things like that. And here there's nothing of that kind. Everything is licked smooth. In a word, bad. But I have to make my peace with it. Yesterday we had a very good time at Uncle Kostya's. We chatted for quite a long time, then said goodbye to the children. Aunt Mavra, judging from her own words, is terribly afraid about tomorrow. In my opinion, after the birth of the little one, Aunt actually looks younger. Now I'll talk about the 17th. I did very well. At least that's what other people said, and even Uncle Nicolasha, who told Maria that I did very well that day. Okay, we'll stop there, and yeah, he goes on to talk about the supper. But lots to unpack in this one. So low expectations about Peterhof, but the good thing is that he has some nice rooms, and Maria kind of gets the short end of the stick. She only has 2 rooms, so apparently Dmitri had more than 2, and one of her rooms was a bathroom, so she basically had an ensuite bedroom. So why would they do that? Was there any aspect of it that was a mark of favor or disfavor? Yeah, I have no idea. I wish I could say, but I don't blame her for being unhappy if her little brother had nicer rooms and more rooms than she had. So the next thing Dmitri brings up is the Tsar's train, and I have translated it the Tsar's train, but actually he's not using a possessive, he's using an adjective that in English would be too awkward. It would have to be something like the Tsarist train. I guess you could say the royal train. And he's quite impressed by it, and we get the impression that he hadn't been on it before. I guess he wouldn't have had any reason to be on it before, because he was Aunt Ella's son, so to speak, and not quite that en famille with Nicholas and Alexandra as yet. But he loves this train, and he uses the word here as an adverb, cozily, but the word cozy is a frequent adjective that he uses throughout his diaries right up until the end. It's another favorite word of his. And what does he mean by it? Yeah, comfortable, maybe, comfortable, and a space that gives you a sense of well-being, I suppose, is what cozy means. I mean, sometimes we think of it as being small, like a cozy cottage, and I guess a train car is relatively small, even if it's the Tsar's train car. But anyway, as I say, he used that word a lot, and he refers to Aunt Alex living on that train when the sovereign is on maneuvers. And so every August, the Guards and St. Military District had summer maneuvers, and it was a big deal, and it was not a strictly military affair. It was a big social occasion. All the Grand Dukes came, people like Shasinska came, and, wives and whole families. And that took place in another suburb of St. Petersburg, Krasnaya Selo, so the Red Village or the Red Settlement. And so women would come, wives would come and live in places like on train cars. If you were a Grand Duchess or an Empress, you could do that. So a question I have, if any of you know the answer, you can kindly let me know, is whether the emperor had his own train, complete with his own locomotive. I'm thinking probably not, but at least in the case of the Grand Dukes, what they had, of course, were train cars that were attached to other trains, so they weren't able to leave exactly when they wanted. They couldn't say, I want my train to leave at 4:15. They had to go with a scheduled passenger train, to which their own cozy car would simply be attached. Okay, so he's sad about leaving Tsarskaya. He's just discovered the old playground, he and Maria's old playground, and he really wants to work on this little railroad, and it's precisely as he feared. He tore the thing up, but then had to leave it unfinished. Well, who knows when he'll be back, because he's going to spend the summer in Ilinskaya. Okay, so this word that he uses, licked smooth. What the heck does that mean? It seems like a pretty straightforward translation, unless there's some, unless there's some phrase, sort of idiomatic phrase that I don't know. But why is everything in Peterhof licked smooth? I don't know. I'm trying to picture how that would pertain to a building. Maybe it's old, or I don't know, or everything is licked smooth in the sense of being pristine and not cozy. I don't know. Let me know what you think if you have a minute. So he's made his peace with it, or he's in the process of making his peace with it. And here we have this nice little interval. He's beginning to appreciate Pavlovsk more and more, so it's a bit of a pity that he'll be away from Pavlovsk. So they go there, and it seems like they have a nice long chat. They spend some time with Uncle Kostya and Aunt Mavra, and after that they go and say goodbye to the children. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but it kind of seems like he and Maria spent some time with their aunt and uncle first, and he really enjoyed that. And that would be quite typical of Dmitri, to prefer to have this attention from the adults instead of just being out playing with the kids, although he seems to have enjoyed that too. And reading this, I was really thinking what a pity it was that Dmitri and Maria weren't, from the beginning in 1902, when their father was banished, that they weren't placed with this family in Pavlovsk. I think their life would have been so much different. And I think they would have objected to it at first because they wouldn't have wanted to be thrown in with all those kids, especially Dmitri. Maria might have liked it, but I can't imagine Dmitri have wanting that at first. But I think, I think he would have come to like it. And Aunt Mavra and Uncle Kostya were real warm-hearted people and real parents, not just delegating the parenting to staff. And so that could have been so good for Dmitri and Maria, but yeah, so it goes. Okay, and then we have sweet Dmitri making this nice comment about how giving birth to her latest and I believe last child has actually made Aunt Mavra look younger. But what is it that she's dreading? What is it that she's terribly afraid about tomorrow? I've been trying to figure this out. And coming as it does right before what he says about her appearance, so Aunt Mavra is, judging from her own words, is terribly afraid about tomorrow. In my opinion, after the birth of the little one, Aunt actually looks younger. So was she afraid of being seen? This was, I think, 16 days after she had given birth. It doesn't sound like she was really the vain type. The other possibility is that the baby was going to be churched or baptized. And in the tradition I'm used to, in the Greek Orthodox Church, this would be too early for that. You would, unless the baby was critically ill, and in which case she would be baptized right away. But the tradition in the Greek Orthodox Church is to wait a full 40 days after the baby is born, and during that time, the mother and the baby both stay at home. They don't attend church services. They're not supposed to go to church. And at the end of that 40 days, the baby and mother return to the church and are greeted by the community, and the priest meets them in the narthex and takes the baby, I may have described this before, and walks through the church up to the royal doors and lifts the baby in the air and even sort of moves it like this and makes the sign of the cross with it and says, "The servant of God," or "the handmaid of God is churched in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." And the community acknowledges this by saying Amen and crossing themselves. And if it's a boy, the tradition was that the priest would take the baby right through the royal doors to the sanctuary. But in the case of a girl, they would not. The sanctuary is supposed to be exclusively male, where the altar is. But nowadays, in my church at least, the priest doesn't go into the sanctuary with either boy babies or girl babies because, he doesn't want to create bad feelings or the perception of inequality with that. All right, so after that, I don't think it's a set period of time, but after that, the baby would then be brought back to church at, some date within, who knows, a month or so. I think that's more the choice of the parents and when they can arrange things, and will be baptized. And I read that Alexander II's wife, the Empress Maria, was terrified when her youngest son, or no, it was her penultimate son, it was Grand Duke Sergei, had his baptism. She was terrified that he would be dropped in the font and drowned, and she really genuinely feared that. she'd had a premonition, I guess. And of course, everything went fine. And of course, Orthodox babies are not sprinkled, they're fully immersed. So yeah, that was a fear that she suddenly had. All right, so tying that in with Aunt Mavra, was she, I'm sure she wasn't afraid that her little girl was going to drown, but what she was afraid about, yeah, well, Dmitri says, judging from her own words, she was dreading something, and we'll just have to leave it at that after my long-winded discussion of that. So now he returns to the 17th. He's still not giving us a detailed account of the parade, but, you know, we're just not going to get that. But he is still so happy about how things went that he wants to write about it again. I did very well, at least, okay, let's be a little modest about this, at least that's what other people said. And even Uncle Nicolasha. So I talked before about how important Uncle Nicolasha would have been as a military role model and someone to look up to. And so, you know, Dmitri was so worried about performing in front of the Tsar. But now that it's in the past, the thing that seems to make him the happiest is that Uncle Nicolasha was so pleased with his performance, and he told Maria that. Not necessarily, I can't remember if he said that to Dmitri himself, but he did tell Maria that, and Maria obviously told Dmitri. All right, and I was wondering, I'm going too long with this, but if I don't say it now, I'll probably forget. I was wondering what the corresponding rite of passage would have been for a girl. And would it have been, you know, sort of coming out at her first grand ball? Maybe that would have been it. I don't know. Had Maria done that, she would be married by 1908. So I don't know, and I wonder, you know, at the back of my mind, I wonder how she felt about Dmitri suddenly being elevated in this way and being the center of attention on this occasion. But because I don't have access to her diaries from this time period, boy, that would be fascinating. I wonder if there are some. I'll have to make inquiries about that, if she was keeping diaries during 1906. I don't get the impression that that was ever quite important to her as much as it was to Dmitri. Her post-revolutionary diaries seem to have been much more sort of, well, I shouldn't say that because Dmitri's are intermittent too. Anyway, rambling again, sorry about that. We'll return tomorrow with the description of the supper, and this is a fuller description than what we have gotten about the parade itself. And we'll also be finishing up with April. All right, hope to see you then. Bye.